Welcome to Culture Snap. I'm Keeva Stratton, and in this episode, I sit down with musician, innovator, business strategist, and all-round extraordinary human, Finbar O'Hanlon. From his early days as a curious problem child in Liverpool to becoming a rock star performing all around the world with some of the biggest bands, to a tech entrepreneur where his career reached even greater heights, Finbar's journey is a testament to the power of curiosity, resilience, and reinvention. Together, we explore how Finbar's relentless drive to solve problems and push boundaries has shaped his remarkable career, and we hear his unique perspective on creativity, innovation, and the future of AI. Enjoy. Finbar O'Hanlon, welcome to Culture Snap.
Keeva Stratton, so nice to be here. Thank you.
I'm thrilled to dive into what is an incredible and remarkable career, Finbar. And I know that there will be many people listening and viewing who have never been exposed to your work. So I'm very excited to bring what you do to them. But it's many, many facets and many different parts. You're a musician, you're an innovator, you're a business strategist, and you have kind of scaled the heights of all of those things.
Well, thanks. I'm looking forward to the conversation and trying to unpack what is a very complex persona.
I don't know that we can do a full unpacking today, but, we'll start. We'll start with the tip of the iceberg. Let's go back to young Finbar and where you first began with music. What led you to picking up a guitar, and did you always want to be a rock and roll star?
Well, no, not really. It was sort of an accident waiting to happen sort of moment, I guess. So I was this problem child when I was a kid. I didn't fit the norm. I'm sure you can relate to that. I'm sure a lot of your listeners can relate to that. I was born in Liverpool in England, moved out to Australia in the late 70s, early 80s. And at that time, my parents put me in a Christian school because, that's the thing to do, right? It's to bring up some good boys. And I was this really curious kid, and I was always curious, and I always am. I still am today. But I used to ask these questions about religion, like, how did this guy part the sea? And I'd always ask these questions of these things in the Bible. And the brothers used to actually, they would get me and give me the strap, and I'd get in trouble, and I'd be sent out of class all the time. And I was really confused because I was this young, curious kid. They thought I was being insolent, that I was challenging the Bible. But I was just this young kid who didn't know and heard all these stories and was trying to find out more, but they couldn't tell me more. And so anyway, I was this troubled child, but everyone thought I was a problem child. But I was just really a kid who was super curious about everything. My brother went on a camp once, to a school camp, and I was like, Mum, how come I can't go on a camp? And my mum's just like, Finbar, will you just shut up? So she took me to the shops in DY, we moved out to Manly from England, and we're in this Warringah Mall in DY, and I was really young, like 9 or 8, and I saw this guitar hanging up on this wall of this store, and it was probably a load of crap, cheap guitar, but at the time it was like amazing to me. It was like a Wayne's World moment. It's like, it was glowing to me. So I was like, Mum, I want that. And she was like, okay, I'll get you a guitar. So never played guitar, never knew anything about guitar. I just grabbed this thing because it looked cool, took it home, and my dad was like, son, now you got a guitar, you've got to play that thing till your fingers bleed. So I went, okay, Dad. So I just went and I played it, and I played it and played it and played it. It came out, and I showed my dad, look, Dad, my fingers are bleeding. And he's like, oh my God, my problem child. What I worked out from an early age, without actually realizing it, was I'd found something. I found something I could connect to. I was never into sport. I didn't like competing against anyone else, but I loved competing against myself. And I found this thing called music, which allowed me to continually challenge myself. It was like a video game that I was playing against myself. I had to go and listen to things and then reverse engineer songs and try and learn how the chords were going. And then my dad bought me a Beatles book, and I started to learn these chords, and I just got so addicted to it that I was spending like every waking hour playing the guitar. And my dad was like, my son's getting really serious about this. And it got to the point where after a couple of years, I was just so besotted by it. My dad took me to some proper lessons, and the first lessons he took me to, he had no idea what a guitar teacher was, but he sent me to Australia's most recognized jazz guy called Don Andrews. So I started learning jazz harmony at the age of 11. And so anyway, it was this sort of a happy accident where I wanted something and I stumbled upon this thing called music, which is a lifelong journey of continual learning, which you will never master. But I never knew that at the time. I just found it like a puzzle that was never ending. As I was progressing, I could see the results and it was inspiring me and it inspired me to do more.
It's a pretty good habit for a young person to have, really, when you think about it. Like I'm sure there's a bit of pester power that got you to buy that guitar in the first place, but I think there's far worse things that young people could be doing for many hours a day.
Yeah, but also back in those days, music was seen as this thing for bums or hopeless like rock and rollers and people who they don't have jobs, they don't fit into society. So it had a bit of a disdain sort of vibe to it. But I think it is good to get into. But at the time, it did have a bit of like, you'll never make anything out of playing music type thing.
So you got some lessons with this incredible jazz guitarist. When did you realize that this was going to be something a little more than just a hobby?
I never planned on it being a career. It was just something that my whole life was invested in. And then this one amazing thing happened. I was in my own little private band playing around Gosford and I had quite a good following and people used to love the band. Were all these kids that were playing that were really, really talented. And I was saved up so much money. I spent a whole year and a half saving money to buy this really good guitar because I always had really cheap guitars and I wanted a really good guitar. And by this stage, I was playing like crazy good. And so I saved up like, I can't remember, it was like $3,000 and back then, and I was going to buy this really expensive guitar, but I decided I was going to go to the big music store in Turramurra and I'm going to try all their guitars and I'm going to walk out with whatever I want. So I went down to this store, so excited, and I got in and I started plugging in guitars and I was playing. And I sort of looked around and all these people were standing around me, watching me play. And I was like, oh, okay. So I just kept playing. And I just had this massive crowd of people watching me play. Anyway, this guy came up to me and he said, look, my name's David Courtney. I'm a producer. He'd done like David Bowie and all sorts of people. And he said, look, would you like to fly to Melbourne to do a session? So I'm like, it was like a dream come true. So I'm like, sure. So anyway, I rang Dad. Dad, can I go to Melbourne? He's like, yeah. So anyway, flew to Melbourne. And then I met Michael Gadinsky through the session. And then Michael put me into this band called Jump Incorporated that had just done a single. It was a top 10 charting band on the top of the pops. And so straight away, I was into the limelight. I was in a top charting band in Australia with records out, touring on all the magazines, doing, Countdown and Hey Hey Saturday and all the shows.
You know what I love about this story, Finbar, was that you were just there to buy a guitar. You were literally just doing your thing and testing it out and, wisely considering how to spend your $3,000, which, by the way, in that era would probably be the equivalent of $15,000 today. That's some pretty serious coin. So I can appreciate that you took some time to kind of think it through. And then all of a sudden you have this incredible, moment where you connected to the right person and the career sets off. Tell me, how far did that career go? Where did it take you? What were some of the highlights?
Oh, look, the highlights were just incredible. I'm meeting all the people I see on TV. We did Countdown with Noiseworks on their very first show. So us and Noiseworks were like headlining and, hanging backstage with all these artists. And Susie Quattro hosted that show, and then we did another show with Jason Donovan, who was big at the time, and all these big people that are on TV. And I'm like, I've just left school and my careers teacher told me that I was going to amount to nothing after a big fight I had with her about me telling her I was going to be a rock star. And next minute I'm a rock star. So it was really interesting,
You can confess to me, did you just do it to get back at your teacher?
I didn't. It felt very good. It was a really, and it's funny, some of the friends that I've got that I've met all across the world. One of my friends was on a major US TV show. He did the same thing. He had a careers teacher that told him he was going to be no good. And then within a couple of months, he had a big TV show blow up. And it's really interesting. It's not that I'm ever about revenge, but it did feel good to know that people are telling me that I can't achieve something and I have,
And I think that's such an important thing because I think when you're young and these adults are kind of limiting you in a way or trying to be realistic, I guess, from their perspective, well-intentioned, I'm sure, but those words matter and they can really stop people from pursuing things that they're very good at. So I love that. I love that you turned it around.
No, they certainly don't. And someone like me who didn't fit a normal job, I was the worst enemy to a careers teacher.
So your star in the musical world is rising, and I can only imagine the kinds of things that you're being exposed to. You've always been someone that somehow stayed away from that. What do you think it was that helped you kind of navigate that world and maintain your own sense of values and ethics and what you wanted to be?
Well, it's a great question. But my father was such an incredible role model for me. He made me work for every cent that I had, but he wasn't tough. He was a tough man, came from the Liverpool docks, but he was such a teddy bear. But he gave me this incredible mentorship when I was young, and he let me believe that no matter what I wanted to be, I can achieve it, and he'll be there to support me for as long as he's on this planet. And he allowed me to believe that me being weird was okay, because everyone around me was telling me that there was something wrong with me. And my dad was telling me, there's nothing wrong with you. You're just different. And find out what it is that you're really good at. You'll be very good at whatever you put your mind to, which was always, I'll be thankful for the rest of my days to that mentorship and guidance. And that's part of it. And secondly, music to me, as I mentioned, was this incredible challenge on myself. And I fell into, at the time, rock stardom. But whilst a lot of people were partying and having a great time, I would often go back to my room and practice guitar. And a lot of people thought I was a bit strange. But for me, I was loving the moment, but I just wanted to be the very best that I could. And for me, my passion was intertwined with my ability to connect with my instrument, not how much I could party, even though I like partying like other people, but that didn't rule my life. That wasn't what I was there for. I wasn't there for fame. I wasn't there for all the trappings of that success. The success was a byproduct of the work I'd put in, and I wanted to keep that work up.
I imagine, Finbar, you would have been surrounded by some pretty inspiring creatives, not just musicians, but the nature of that industry is that you can be exposed to all different types, photographers, filmmakers. Who stood out for you as inspirations kind of earlier in your career that you got exposed to?
There was obviously people when I was younger that I just was totally besotted by and inspired to be, which was like Eddie Van Halen. And, I was one of these kids that at 15, when he just came out, within, the first month of hearing me, I was playing a lot of his songs and it was blowing people's minds. Just not because I was extra talented. It's just that I just had to work this out. It was like a challenge that I couldn't put down until I got it right. My heroes all back then were musicians that were extraordinary to me and were pushing the boundaries of the instrument. And so I've always been someone that likes to be pushing boundaries. So I would always try and decode what they were doing. But you got to remember, back then, there was no digital recorders. It was a tape deck. And so I had to learn by ear and to listen to a whole mix of a rough live concert and try and listen it through my headphones and work out the guitar parts in the whole mix. So I developed a really good ear. And so they were really my early influences in especially music.
So you mentioned there that when you first started out in music, there were no digital recordings and all of these things were very much something that you witnessed coming to life. When that technology entered into the world of music, did it take your interest? Is this something that sparked your kind of curiosity for innovation?
Yeah, so before I was ever in the innovation space, I was always at the very razor sharp at the edge of the cutting edge. So I'd always be interested in what is the latest. And I would be the guy reading every single technical manual, knowing the operating specs, signal to noise ratio, everything about everything of all this stuff that was coming out. And I got to be a subject matter expert on certain digital recording technology before they even hit the country. I was so up with all that. My passion shifted from practicing 8 hours, 10 hours a day on guitar to doing probably 3 or 4 hours a day on guitar, and the rest of my time focused on, all these new technologies. So it was sort of all this new stuff. I was really, really interested in it. And that's really how, funnily enough, it was how I transitioned from just being a guitar player into starting into my own business career.
Did you ever think of music production?
not only into the production, I got into the psychoacoustics of it, which is the mathematics and the science behind how the human body resonates with sound frequencies. So I got into all the technical math algebra of it, all right through the production techniques to mixing engineering, all the technology. So yeah. And so what actually happened for me was I'm playing guitar. I'm playing these clinics all around Australia. And then I get a phone call. It's from this guy in Melbourne, Gordon Blake, who rings me up and says, Finn, I saw your clinic in Melbourne. Look, me and my partner are putting together what's going to be Australia's biggest music store back in the time in Melbourne. And I lived in Sydney. And he said, how would you like to be a partner? Come to Melbourne and help set up this store and you run all the guitars. And I was like, I love guitar, but I'm guitared out. What I'm really interested in is all this digital technology that's coming out. It hasn't hit yet, right? How about we set up Australia's first computer-based music store? And he said, what the hell are you talking about? I don't even know about this. And I'm like, I'll come down and I'll do it with you as long as we start selling computer software for music. And he's like, will you do that and guitars? And I said, yeah, okay, no worries. So moved to Melbourne. We set up this music store. It was mega. It was a massive build. We had all the products in there. And then I went and pitched to Apple Australia. And anyway, they ended up we had to buy a lot. We had to spend a load of money up front. We bought it. We did it. And then we detonated the market. We exploded. We had everyone coming to us from all over Australia were coming to us to buy computers and music and software. Then all the brands came in. So all of a sudden, I'm the subject matter expert. Then Apple contacts me and asks me to be the Masters of Media Specialist for Australia. So next minute, I'm working for Apple as the guy who knows all about digital media and represents Apple. So all the big studios are ringing me. I'm going into the big recording studios, post-production studios. I'm doing stuff with Avid and DigiDesign, all these big companies. Just because, again, I didn't plan on it. I was just so besotted by it. I started learning all this stuff. And then when it exploded, I had this retail juggernaut now, which I was a partner in, that was working. And then all the companies wanted me to go and represent them and do showcases for them. And so that then laid the bedrock for the rest of my life.
Incredible. I do think, we talk about luck, but I always think that you've got to work really hard to create luck and to be ready for when those opportunities come around. So, you were playing your guitar in the store that day, but of course you'd spent many years mastering, perfecting and learning that art form to be lucky enough to have someone notice you. And likewise, obviously, you took some enormous risks in business at a time when really digital technology, recording technology, software, all of those things were totally unproven. So you've started to build this career that's now, it's music, but it's also tech. Where do we go from there, Finbar? What happened next?
I'm now a subject matter expert working with all these companies, and I'm doing all this stuff. I did like Paul Oakenfold streaming concerts in Australia. I'm doing all these bits and pieces for all these different companies. And so a guy I met worked at a company called Nortel Networks, which is a big networking company. And they were selling these very high-end enterprise-grade servers. And they were trying to sell these servers for what was back then called voice over IP, which was when telephony was expensive and STD calls were expensive. It was about ways to use them over a network. They were trying to sell this box that was like $20,000 back then to big clients, enterprise clients, and they were struggling against Cisco. And I said, oh, cool. Can I have a look at it? And he goes, yeah, okay, come up to Nortel. So I went to the Nortel headquarters. I'm looking at this box and I said, it just looks like a computer because it was a square white box. And he goes, well, yeah, but it's a voice over IP dedicated enterprise grade server. So I said, yeah, but it looks like a computer and it's got cards in the back. He goes, right. And at the time I'd been doing stuff with this company Media 100 and these other cards that go in computers to capture digital audio and video. So I said to him, who are you trying to sell it to? And he said, well, our biggest customer I'm trying to sell it to is National Australia Bank. So I said to them, well, why have they got TV commercials on TV? And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, why does NAB have TV commercials on? He goes, well, I don't know. I said, well, is it because they're trying to get people into the branch? And he goes, yeah. And I said, well, then why don't they have the same commercials in the branch? They own the TV commercials. They own the branches. Why don't we build a distribution network to actually send their long story short, they went, you're insane. And I said, well, I'll build the software. So I had no idea what I was doing. I got a copy of this software called Macromedia Director, and I built a software called Amadeus Suite. I got it working. I tested it. I demonstrated it. Nortel was so blown away. They flew me to America to demonstrate it, to Florida. I demonstrated the software. They had Deutsche Telekom, all these providers around the world wanting to buy it. So Nortel bought my software. I was like, oh my God, I don't have to work for anyone. I can just build software. And I didn't really know what I was doing. I learned to code by not learning to code. There was no courses. So I went on, became a QuickTime developer and downloaded templates and reverse engineer it, just like I did with the tapes, with the Van Halen tapes. I sort of looked at this code, and because I'd learned to read music, to me, it was like working out where it's going and how it's working. And then, so I didn't learn code the traditional way. I learned it by reverse engineering. So it sort of set me on a path for life. So that was my start as being an entrepreneur. Again, falling into it by accident, by solving a problem without me trying to be an entrepreneur.
And it sounds to me like you're so problem driven. You know, there's so many people in the world who are profit driven. They're looking for those profiteering opportunities. But for you, Finbar, it's like, I see a challenge here that can be solved. Why don't we just solve it? I think that's what's so fascinating, and probably why people trust you with these opportunities as well, because it does come from such a genuine, place of curiosity.
Yeah, I found it's really fascinating that you ask people what the problem is, and they'll tell you the problem, but they don't realize that the problem often exists behind the problem. They're coming up with problem statements. They're not coming up with questions. And so what I try and do is I always try and figure out what the questions are and how to invoke what the questions are, and have a range of questions that probe deep to see if, to actually validate whether the problem that they're telling me is the problem is actually the problem. And that's a key part of why I've had success in innovation, is really getting that foundation right of really validating that problem, or actually finding out if there's a problem behind the problem, and then put the questions around that to lay the context for where the ideation or the next part of it comes from. But back then I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah, and I can see almost that child, the problem child of Finbar, who was asking why, which may have annoyed some of your teachers initially. When you combine that with a love of challenge, I think that's where the thrill of the problem solving, or the addiction to the problem solving, becomes that driver as well.
Exactly right, yeah.
And this is before the language of design thinking and systems thinking and all of this stuff, which we now know so well. So you've discovered you've got a bit of an art for this kind of technology. You can develop a bit of software, albeit you don't consider yourself a coder. The musical career is kind of humming along in the background, but you've got this new taste of innovation. What comes next?
So what comes next is me working with other people on different technologies, mainly around media, video and audio. And this is, got to remember, this is a time from 2000 to 2009 when the whole world was transitioning from television into the ability to actually have in 2007, Steve Jobs held a pane of glass the size of playing cards in his hand, which was the launch of the iPhone. And then 1 year later, in 2008, App Store launch, which was like transformed the world. What you could do with digital media now, you could share files, you could have 1,000 songs in your pocket. This wasn't available in the times when I'm talking about where we're up to in my career. And so I was on this really big transformation point in history whereby I seem to be in amongst the mix of this world whereby audio and video media is being transformed into digital files that can be streamed and sent all over the world. And so I started working on building technologies in that space. And, I started to realize early on that if people, especially in Australia, it's a very, very tough country to raise capital, that if I was going to raise investment, I needed to understand the art of intellectual property and how to put patents together and the whole structure around how do I communicate to an investor through a lens where A, they see the hype curve, 2, they want to be on the journey with me, and 3, that I can actually put some sort of guardrails in terms of their investment in place whereby if everything goes wrong, they've got potential return on their investment through the IP. I was really faced on this challenge of how do I find the working capital to help my ideas come to life? And what is the process that I need to go through? And I was really quite successful. I managed to raise my first $2 million in a couple of days in Singapore on a technology that didn't exist, on a PowerPoint deck with a made-up video file that someone made for me and a website that just had login and nothing else behind it. And so it was I learned the art of storytelling really well. It really helped me craft that art form. And funnily enough, it's an art form that I don't know of it being taught in any entrepreneur bootcamp, startup accelerator, Yet for me, it was one of the most important skills to allow investors to come on your journey, to help them see your North Star, and to help staff align onto your vision. Because if you don't have that vision and you don't have that passion and direction, it's really, really hard to get anything going, let alone in this country.
And I imagine, having had such a unique inside perspective of the music industry, you would have been well equipped to really understand, what that industry was struggling with, and what could be unlocked through digital technologies, perhaps more so than, quite often you get young people from Silicon Valley or places like this who are very good technically and perhaps have learnt the methodologies of innovation, but haven't had that rubber hit the road of experiencing, an industry's worth of challenges.
Yeah, well, it's a big part of my discovery process. Again, this is something I learned later on in life, trying to codify my brain. But it was that ability to have a multi-layered discovery process where you're looking at not just market trends, but you're looking at business, you're looking at users, you're looking at technology. So you're looking at a 4-quadrant discovery to really get a lot of insights which help validate your hypothesis. These are all fancy words I talk now, but when I was young, I had no idea what I was talking about. I just knew that I had to look everywhere rather than look in one direction, because I knew that finding the cracks that no one else could see came from a very deep understanding of the problem statement and the world that the problem statement immerses itself in.
So many people really do hold themselves back because of what some call imposter syndrome and that sense of self-doubt. Like, what gives me the right to ask for $2 million, or what makes me believe in this idea and its success? What was going through your mind around some of those, new ideas and how you're pitching them? And did you ever have doubt, or what gave you confidence?
Great question. Never had doubt. For me, it's like seriously, it's as simple as this. If you don't believe in your problem statement, if you don't believe in your journey, no one else is going to. So I had to live and breathe. For me, it wasn't about coming up with a pitch so I can raise some money. It was about me truly understanding a massive opportunity, a massive unmet need in the market, and me having a solution to it. And so that overrid everything. Whether I was asking for, $400 million or $2 million, to me, it made no difference. To me, it was really about, hey, who wants to be on my journey? This is a big problem that someone needs to solve. Someone's going to solve it. Why can't it be me?
I love that reframe. Why can't it be me, as opposed to why shouldn't it be me? And I think that's certainly something I've always felt throughout my life, is like, well, if I don't, who will, right? And it might as well be you.
Well, the other thing I recognized really early on, and it was, maybe it came from my teaching or schools or whatever, is that I realized that these so-called experts were experts in knowing everything about the rules that they work in. And the reason these problems weren't being solved is because the people that were looking at them were these experts who were defined by these rules. And so the people that are going to solve the problem are people that aren't experts, that can see outside the rules. And I recognized that early on, because I would be going, if they're so smart and I've got a solution, why haven't they got a solution?
Yeah.
And so it used to confound me in the early days, until I realized that their domain level expertise is the thing that's stopping them from innovating, because they're guided by a set of rules, which their expertise, by the very nature of their expertise, is stopping them from going outside those rules. Whereas I operate completely outside the rules. I say to people, think about one product that's transformed your life. Anything. An Apple Watch, Dyson vacuum cleaner, doesn't matter. Do this. Go and research before it was built. Where did the idea come from? Find the point when it was imagination. Find the point when it was creativity, when they started assembling different things in different ways to come up with a solution. Find the part when it was invention, when they created it. And then find the part when it was innovation, when the creation of something new has realized value to someone else. Find those 4 points on each story, and it will teach you a lot about the innovation process. It will give you a very good insight into how you transform good ideas into world-changing products. But most people don't do that. They just go, oh, that's amazing, so cool. And then they're at the surface level. And this is like that thing about finding the problem behind the problem. Go deep on curiosity. At this stage in my life, I didn't know that, but I did recognize that these experts weren't solving the problems. And it really confused me for a while until I really put a lot of research into it. And I realized it was their own expertise was holding them back.
So you started to practice innovation almost as a discipline throughout this kind of phase of your career. Music's obviously still playing a role, but it sounds to me like your passion expanded and that problem-solving arena got so much larger than a concert, right? This is an opportunity now for you to kind of dive into all different areas of media and technology. What did you find on that journey in terms of what was lighting you up? What was getting you excited?
I was getting really excited about being on the edge of a shifting culture and the zeitgeist being moved by a technology at the time, because it was sort of like, and me being there and being somehow recognized in this pool of these great people. So, it's very hard to explain to people because people just don't believe the types of things that my career's had. But, 1 minute I'm flying on a private jet in Cannes, staying in a mansion on the water at the Cannes Film Festival, having Cuba Gooding Jr. stay with me and Sean Penn come down, and we're going to Hotel de Cap. Next minute I'm flying up to meet with the head of Telefonica, going up working with the German Soccer League, flying back to the US, with the Playboy Mansion with all these like famous people, and then having all these big famous investors, and it's just a crazy life. And I'm this guy, he's a guitar player, just invents stuff, and I just seem to be in this whirlwind of this change in culture. And just because I happen to be inventing and building technology in this space, all this investment money's coming in and companies are building and structures are building, and it's becoming like a little bit too overwhelming for me. Like I loved all that stuff, but once you start then putting offices in different countries and you've got tax status and you've got employees, I'd started off as this founder that ended up with, business that's got like all this complexity and skills that I just didn't have to be running a company like this. And I found myself being elevated into a place where I just didn't want to be. And one of my mentors, great mentor, world-renowned talent, super, super smart person. He sat me down and he said, right, he goes, put all your things you like doing and the things you don't like doing on a list. And I just did that. And he goes, right. He goes, what you need to do is you need to find a CEO. You need to find people to take all this load off your shoulders, and you just need to be a founder. And it was one of the greatest things for me because it gave me this release to go, well, actually, I've got all this investment capital. Stuff it. I'll just go and find the best investor I can. So I went and a best CEO, did that, found the best team, put them all together and just became a founder again and an inventor. But it was this huge learning experience, huge stress of me trying to be this person because my investors wanted me to be the CEO because they invested in me. So it was a really interesting life journey for me, trying to learn what I'm not good at because for so long I'd been driven by passion and falling into businesses. And now all of a sudden I had a really serious business with lots of money invested and working on a really big moonshot idea, working in the back of some of the biggest telcos. And it was a big learning experience for me. It was learning what not to do was one of the most powerful lessons in my life, I think.
It's so important, isn't it, to know what your definition of success is. I think this is something that, particularly mid-career people, when those opportunities start to increase and you might find yourself in a much more senior position or managing a lot of people just because you've succeeded, right, based on your past success. I think this is something that's such a great lesson that it's okay to define your version of success and know where your limit is. Know what lights you up and know where you need to kind of exit or bring in other people. But it's tough, right, because they invested in Finbar and so you feel that obligation almost to begin with that, you need to be the CEO or the head of the thing.
I got really brutal and I had some staff saying like I'm the worst boss ever. But at the time I was so stressed. And so I realized I didn't have the emotional intelligence then to be able to manage my team. So this is where one of the reasons I put in someone who was much better at me at running people. And so that's a long way of saying that you're exactly right, Keeva. I had to learn the hard way. I had to get myself to a point of complete burnout before I got brutally just clear. And being really clear was something that just unlocked so much joy and rekindled my passion for my work again, because I was just sucked into this vortex by accident that was totally of my own making, but I just didn't know how to put the guardrails up to protect my own energy. So what I did was I was brutally clear about if I don't have my own energy protected, then how can I ever affect in a positive way the energy of those around me?
These are the hard lessons, but I think they're super important. And I hope that anyone who's listening to this right now who feels like their success has almost overwhelmed them and they've created their own prison of success, if you like, it is, I think, healthier for everyone to actually let yourself go from that and to, even if it means breaking down the walls and starting again. I just think those things are so true, but they're really hard lessons to learn, particularly when you're in it and you've been taught a certain version of what success looks like and kind of responsibility. It's a nice segue there, Finbar, because since I've known you, you're someone who is a really deep thinker, not just in terms of the problems you're solving or looking at the zeitgeist or really, the stuff of industry. But for me, you're someone who also spends a lot of time inwards. Tell me a little bit about that journey for yourself and, where it's taken you.
Yeah, there's been, like everyone that's probably listening to this, there's points in your life that define you. And one of those points for me was I was in Paris and I was doing some streaming for the Buddhist channel and I met this Rinpoche who was a Tibetan Buddhist master. And it was in the middle of the day and I had to meet him at this club. And his minders came up to me and said he wanted me to give me a gong session. I was like, I don't need a gong session. I'm fine. Thanks so much. Anyway, ended up doing this thing and he was basically told me my purpose of my life and what I need to be focusing on and what I don't need to be focusing on. And it was just in one of those moments where it just had so much clarity for me. So I was so burnt out. I was so tired. And this person told me, they said, this is who you're supposed to be and this is who you are right now. And it was like, it just hit me like a hammer. And I was so caught up in my ego and my brand and what I'd done. And I was living very grandiose. And I remember leaving that place in Orteliers in Paris and I started walking back to Champs-Élysées where I was staying and it was raining and it was like nighttime was coming. There was a warm rain and I just walked the whole way back. And it was like, it felt like my whole thing had cleansed and it felt like I had a deeper connection to, it sounds so weird, but I had this deeper connection to something greater than me. And it gave me a new purpose, which was this mind that was always so crazy and fluttering around and going crazy all the time. And I had this sort of like central foundation of like a spine or some sort of skeleton or some sort of structure that I could connect to, which was peaceful. It all sounds weird what I'm talking about, but at the end of the day, I started then reflecting inwards and started trying to codify my life and started trying to figure out, I got to that moment in your life where I went, what is this all about? Who am I? And what's my purpose here beyond work? And how do I use what I've got in a way that can make me happy, but also reflect outward? And, I had this belief system that came from that, which is if I can make everyone that I connect with leave with more than I take, then I'm going to be in a much better place, myself personally and for the world. And so I started working by this mantra of how do I have a point in the day where I reflect? And then how do I have a point in my day where I respond? And in the mornings, I wake up at 4 a.m. I do my internal meditation, whatever work I do on myself. And then I reflect and this is my reflection time. And this is where sometimes I write posts like this morning where I do a deep reflection inside and I start to think about these things and I put them together in my head. And then I come out of that and I go into my respond mode, which is where all the challenges of the day hit me and my work and bits and pieces in all the different things I'm doing. I'm not there yet, but as I get older and more mature, I'll probably be able to make them sort of become one. But at the moment, they are two different distinct things. But yeah, it's just part of my growth path. But it was this point in time where it made me, something hit my life that made me reflect inwards. Sometimes that's a sickness. Sometimes it's you meet someone. For me, it was meeting someone and that person changed my life. And I've had this mantra since I was young, which is today I might meet someone that will change my life. And if I look back every single time that I've had something amazing happen in my life, it's because I've met someone. And that keeps me open to opportunities, open to possibilities, and not have any biases which stop me from taking opportunities as they come.
I love that, obviously you had this moment, probably the world was screaming at you, right? And it's always cinematic with you, Finbar. It had to be warm rain in Paris. And the hair would have been bedraggled and then you would have gone
I've got all my hair back tonight, but normally it was all out. Yeah, honestly, as I say, and Keeva, you know a little bit about me, but for those listening, honestly, my life is just an incredible storybook of the incredible things that have happened to me. And I don't know why. I'm not special. I'm not anything. I'm just this curious kid who is still a curious kid. I'm 58. I'm still a curious kid. I'm still in awe of the world. I'm still in awe of magic. And I'm still in awe of the fact that you put two people together that have a connection. Like we met and we instantly became friends that very first time I met you. I just knew straight away we'd have a long friendship. And that to me is more special than anything. That's more special than being in Paris in the rain. It's more special. And that's what I live for, is this, who knows what's possible when you put two people together that just have this, and especially when they're different people, not the same tribe. I'm just, I work with some amazing people. I've just written another series of white papers coming out with Dr. Marcus Bowles, one of Australia's leading academics in working futures. He is so different to me. Like, he is an academic. He's a bit like your husband. This guy is, but we're so aligned in human capabilities and skills of the future and all that sort of stuff that we're working together as this odd couple. But it's beautiful. And it's actually a testament to the things that we write about. So
I think if you're someone who, philosophy is probably a bit of a heavy word for it, but if you're drawn to the thinking and the possibility of what could be, I think there is just so much opportunity. And much like you, I love the opposites attract kind of scenario where you take people from entirely different worlds. In fact, every time I'm really excited by an expert or a specialist, it's someone who's out of my field entirely. I'm just so intrigued as to what their day looks like and their world, and that myopia you develop as a specialist where you're just like so into your thing. And I think you learn so much from those interactions rather than sticking with your community or the kind of people that sit in your industry. You've gone on this enormous journey, Finbar, and I see every layer of this journey as having such alignment. I'm sure at the time it felt quite like you were heading off into different directions and going in different ways. You've become kind of known in Australia as a bit of a tech and innovation rock star. There seems to be a lot of fear around AI and a lot of concern. What's your view on how AI might shift our society and what's the up and the down of that?
Well, I have a completely different take on it. And when I say completely different, it might be completely different, but it's completely different to the narratives that I'm seeing played out. And I luckily get to speak on stage with a lot of the big tech companies about this. And so I just want to maybe portray a different angle if I can, if I may. And I might start with understanding what creativity is before I explain AI. The definition of creativity or creativity systems is coming up with solutions to problems via reorganization of existing things. That sounds super complicated. Well, let me break it down. Creation of solutions to problems. Everyone knows what that means. By reorganizing existing things. But think about this. Most people think creativity is about painting or music or art, the arts. But it's much more than that. If you take that definition that I've just said, if you think about painters, what is a painter? Painting is an art form and it's creative. Okay, let's break that down. A painter has brushes, a canvas, and paints. These are existing things. So the way they mix them together in different ways creates a solution to a problem. And that solution to a problem might be the artist wants to be known for his art. He wants to sell his art. He wants to be in a gallery, whatever that problem. But it's the combination of the mixture of existing things creates the output. If you're a musician and you play notes on a guitar, you play with another bass player or a drummer or keyboard. It's the combination of those notes and the way they go in what sequence and what orders is the art of creativity, the mixing existing things, the notes, the blah, blah, blah. But it happens in business. It happens in life. You can be creative in the way you educate your kids. You can be creative in the way you run your business. It's by getting things and putting them together in new ways to create a new outcome, a solution to a problem. Okay, so now I've defined that. What's that got to do with AI? What if AI is one of the brushes? What if in a world where we're augmented humans, we could use AI using creativity systems and different thinking methodologies to be able to have an adaptive mindset where AI empowers a new future whereby we as humans can focus on being more human, create deeper connections, create deeper engagement, create much more memorable moments. And so we've been educated into a world that no longer exists. And so what I say is that to work in a world that currently exists, we need to upgrade our human operating system. Every single person listening to this call is running a human operating system. From birth, we're given the DNA and the constructs in our operating system to know how to survive, how to breathe, how to live. We've got blood circulating around our body every 2 minutes. We've got a heartbeat going. We're taking in oxygen. Who taught you that? No one. It's inbuilt into your natural state. But our brain has two core components, our conscious and our subconscious, and they're part of our operating system. The conscious is like our user interface. It allows us to interact with the world. We make conscious decisions about how we buy things, how we do things. It's like pressing buttons on a user interface. Our subconscious, not only does it run our bodily functions and our ability to survive, but it also stores our autonomous behaviors. These are the programs over life that we've trained it on. And so they become autonomous behaviors. When you put your foot on the brake pedal, you don't think about it. When you steer the car, you don't think about it. You just do it. And so if you believe that, if you know that you put on the foot, you don't actually think about it when you put your foot on the brake. If you know that there are autonomous systems running that you've been trained on, because you don't naturally know there's a brake pedal. You get taught that. And so we choose over our life, what are those things that we want to hold on to which become autonomous? And why do I say that? Human operating system to thrive in a world of the future, the first thing we need to do is not just learn new stuff. We need to figure out what are the autonomous behaviors that are not serving us in a world that's rapidly adapting. We're adapting faster than any time in history. The curve is like off the charts in terms of how much we're growing. And if we have a fixed mindset, the gap between the world and our mindset is getting greater and greater, and the value that we have is getting less and less in this world. What does that then entail? It entails fear, disconnect, stress. So the first way to deal with that is to start to build an adaptive mindset. And the way to build an adaptive mindset is to start to identify, like a 12-step program, what are the autonomous behaviors that are not serving me? What's holding me back? And there are tricks you can use to do that. If someone says something to you and it makes your emotions rise, bang, there is a bias right there that's ready to act on your behalf to protect a belief system. What is a belief system? Why do you have it? What are you trying to protect? You might be trying to protect years of knowledge because you don't want it to be proven wrong. At one time in history, the earth was believed to be flat and all science was proven to prove the earth was flat until it wasn't. And then it required a shift in our mental model, our ability to adapt to this new evidence, not fight it. And so for me, it's really about where AI is going, is it's transforming the world. Now, what do we need to pay attention to? ChatGPT is the great illusionist. It's amazing. It blows everyone's minds. It is never always right, but it is always convincing.
That's true.
So start to understand where it plays very strongly. And so if I'm a musician and I play notes, and put them all together and orchestrate them, sounds great. AI can do that. If I write a Word doc or a PDF or research, AI can do that. If I want to create a video, AI can do that. But it does it at the surface level. Now, it makes it look great, makes it just look like a human's created it, but there's a lot missing. In music, the notes, the way they're organized, is the melody. Putting them together creates a song. But in music, there's much more than the note. There's the dynamics, there's the timing between the notes, there's the emotional connection that it drives. And so there's a lot of context around the notes, around the words that give human connection. I'll give you an example. If I said to you, Keeva, how are you going? And you go, really good. And then there's a 500-foot wall of flame behind you coming to you at 50 miles an hour, I would react differently than if I said, how are you going? And you're sitting at a cocktail party on the beach in, Cabo San Lucas. Because the context helps me reframe the understanding of the response. And so humans play an intricate part in being able to describe, prescribe, and understand the context. Yet, you know what? We haven't been taught those skills. Blind people can hear better than people with sight. People that have got low hearing can actually observe better because they've got amplified senses. And so I think, in a world of AI, we can look at it through a number of lenses. If it's a paintbrush in the palette and we have an adaptive mindset and we can be available to opportunities as they arise, we have the recipe-making ingredients to create the context around what AI produces, which drives human connection, human emotion, and value. Because value driven by intelligence will be a commodity. So that's a big, long-winded way of me saying I'm very optimistic about AI. I'm very optimistic that it's going to help us become more human. I'm very optimistic that soon the magic show that is AI, that's blowing people's minds by creating things that never thought was possible, will soon become normal, and we will look for other meaning in AI. And I think at that point, when all the razzle-dazzle is over, we'll be at a point where we start to evaluate how AI can impact our lives in impacting others. And I think that that's a point where we'll start thinking strategically about the value that AI has. I understand the concerns are there and we need to address them and we need to build responsible frameworks. But I don't think it's doom and gloom. I think doom and gloom is typically painted by people who aren't yet informed enough about the potential. They're more sort of worried about the potential of change rather than the potential of opportunity.
Perhaps the learning we have to do is a little unlearning as well, some of the beliefs that we've started to build around these particular technologies. Maybe James Cameron and the Terminator didn't do a great job of introducing the future to us, just hypothetically.
Well, it's fascinating to me because, I live in a world of technology with technologists in a lot of cases, and I'm someone that's deeply entrenched in technology, but I'm also deeply entrenched in humanity. I find it, and then I'm also deeply entrenched in storytelling. I think the art of storytelling mixed with humanity and technology seems to be quite a unique combo platter, but I think it's, at least for me, I think people need to hear that it's more than just this technology advancement that's going to take over the world. Yes, it might, but I think that the people who are adaptive will always have the capability. You can't have a coffee with ChatGPT.
That is true. You certainly cannot. And I really hope the day never comes. I would like it to make my coffee rather than me have to, grind the beans.
Well, that's the difference between AI ruling the world and AI augmenting your ability to improve your options.
Exactly. I'm looking forward to the robot house cleaning. That's the thing I'm most excited about. But no, I think it's a bright and exciting future. Finbar O'Hanlon, what a journey you have been on. What an inspirational person you are. And I would encourage anyone listening to this, watching this, please check you out on LinkedIn, check out your website, follow you, because I think there are so many wonderful places that you're going to lead us.
Great. Well, no, feelings totally mutual, Keeva. You're very inspirational and I love being connected to you.
Thanks, Finbar.